Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and we are joined by an awesome guest today. I've been so excited to welcome him to the show because I'm going to say this, that first, you're going to fall in love with his business. You're going to love his mission and what he helps other people with. But then, more importantly, you're going to fall in love with him and his entrepreneurial journey and how mission driven he is in this life and with all the things that he does. So first things first, I'm going to tease you with his business. I've never done this in an intro to an episode, but he's the head of growth at Cosmoforge. So what is Cosmoforge? Well, they help business owners break through the 1 million per year revenue barrier by offering hands-free marketing strategies. You're probably really excited to hear about that. So we're going to get into that today, but we're going to get into it because the head of growth of Cosmoforge, Dillon Hill, he's joining us here in today's episode. Dillon has more than 10 years of marketing experience working with small to enterprise size businesses. His career really took off when he dropped out of college to create a foundation in honor of his friend whom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The foundation amassed over 200 million views and broke 3 world records. Now, Dillon's taking what he learned about explosive growth and helping other companies dream big. Now, because Dillon's a humble guy, I'm going to very happily brag for him here that one of the world records that his foundation broke was largest bone marrow donation drive. His friend who had leukemia, they were seeking to raise awareness for the 0.006% chance of finding a perfect genetic match. And guess what happened? It worked. They found it. 13,000 people signed up to donate bone marrow. One of those was the match that his friend needed, so his life was saved. It speaks volumes to the power of marketing, the power of raising awareness, the power of doing good in the world. And when you align all that stuff with powerful marketing and a focus on growth, you just end up with good business and a good life. So I'm excited to learn from our guest here today. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Dillon Hill. All right, Dillon, I'm so excited to have you here on the show with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Heck yes, I'm personally so excited to learn from you, not only business-wise, but I'm so excited to dive into your story. So we're going to kick things off there. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Dillon? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, the very first one was my family's ran a small business, sort of a means for when I was young, when I was a toddler, an infant, when I was 1 to 3 years old. My family, we lived out of the back of a van, and my dad started his business, and it brought us from that point to where the family is now, which is very comfortable, and it empowered me to do a lot of the things that I would end up doing. So I was always very much inspired by entrepreneurship. I saw firsthand what it can do. And sometime in high school, my dad came to me knowing that, for lack of a better way to put it, I was a computer nerd. And he said, things are slowing down a bit right now. What can you do? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. I knew how to Google things. So that's kind of where I started. And that is my first foray into marketing, I guess, was helping the family business. And I learned a lot. Of course, a lot of technical stuff, but really a lot of how my brain works. And sort of, I guess, my ability to begin that whole process, really. It gave me confidence, right? So, yeah, we talked about the foundation, but actually before that in high school, when I was 17, I created a charity that helps kids in the hospital with virtual reality. I sort of took what I learned with my dad's business, and I was like, wow, I really enjoy this. This is great. It's so fulfilling to be able to go through this process and build something. So let's do that. Let's do that in a way where it helps other people. So I made that organization, a group of teenagers, tons of stories I could tell there, but sort of the byline was we started off selling cake pops door to door, and next thing you know, a group of us, we had raised over $200,000. Since then, we have provided video games and virtual reality to children's hospitals across the country. And I continued to do that as I went through college. And then, as you mentioned at the top, as I was attending university, my childhood best friend, he called me. He said, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they gave me 1 year to live. And Part of it was, I mean, that's terrible to hear, right? That introduced a lot of really complicated emotions. And I knew that I couldn't spend that year sort of sitting in lecture halls doing econ homework, just sort of waiting for that to happen. And then on the other side, because of the experience with the family business, because of the experience with that nonprofit, I had so much confidence in my ability to make something happen. At the very least, we can do the small things, right? Like we can put together a road trip, for example, in that last year. But we told our story. We said, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Like you said, it went extremely viral. And it's so viral, in fact, that afterwards, when things sort of settled down, when he did enter remission because of that world record, I really felt confident in, okay, this is something I am very passionate about. This is something that can really help people, which, a lot of people in business say, but I saw firsthand, it really does. It saved his life. It brought my family out of poverty. Entrepreneurship is something really beautiful, and I want to continue to be a part of that. So, you mentioned in the intro, I've worked with small businesses and large businesses, anywhere from someone who has $100 a month to spend to, I've worked with companies, international companies like MoneyGram. Like, I've seen it all, and I'm relatively young, so it's very weird to say that. But basically what we do now for our clients is we take a look at, where are you now? You're probably somewhere in the middle of those two examples, those two extremes. But what would it take to get you to that point of that really large organization? And having worked in a few of them, what are some of the things what are sort of like the technical, the marketing debt that they have where they're really inefficient at their scale that could have been resolved way back when they were a small business? How can we introduce that now so that you can grow very fast, but more importantly, you can grow really sustainably? Which in hindsight, of course, I wasn't thinking this in the time, but when we built that foundation, within 24 hours, we had 1 million views. We had companies, celebrities, people internationally reaching out to us in different languages, trying to be there. And so we were sort of forced to grow fast. And again, it wasn't a business. It was my best friend's last year. But in hindsight, in reflection, I learned so much about what it takes to be ready for when the marketing really works, in a way where you can continue to scale. So yeah, it's been a crazy adventure. It's, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, for sure. I love hearing about that, Dillon, because it has so many cool twists and turns, but all of them have led you to that path of growth. And I really want to start there with regards to growth, because just like you, I started my first business when I was a teenager. I was 19. It was after freshman year of college, and I realized there's only so many video games and ultimate frisbee and soccer that I can play. I should probably do something more productive. So I started my first business out of passion. It was a soccer blog. And Dillon, I'll tell you this, that as a 19-year-old, I dreamed so big because society hadn't coached that out of me yet. I wanted to become one of the most read soccer blogs in the world, and that's why we reached 3.5 million people a month. We were winning awards from the English Football Association. I had no business doing that as a 20-something-year-old American kid in his dorm room. And so somewhere along the way, though, especially working with other entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs like I do these days, I realized that as adults, we dream smaller. And I don't know if it's because we think it's safer, if we think it's more attainable, it's an easier target, but I want to hear your perspective on growth, because it seems like that's so ingrained in your attitude towards life and business.
Yeah, I think going back to that charity in high school, there was an issue where, because we were under 18, we were not allowed to do what we set out to do. We were not allowed to visit kids in the hospital for the most part. Typically, they would need an adult, right? Somebody qualified to manage those relationships, to sort of sign the paperwork to allow us to go and volunteer, especially with at-risk populations, kids with cancer and things like that. And that was really upsetting. And that led to a situation where we begged and we said, please let us in. And ultimately we did. We made our very first visit to a local children's hospital. And it was incredible. And we came back afterwards and we said on social media, we visited this hospital. It was incredible. Thank you to everyone who donated so far to make that happen. Here's to many more. And in that post, we used the logo of this children's hospital. A few days later, I get a phone call. I step out of yearbook class to take this phone call. I'm excited to hear back. When can we visit again? And they had actually said that because we had used their logo without permission, we would no longer be allowed to visit the kids there. So the one opportunity we had, we kind of lost because we were naive. And, I don't really know this in the moment, but in reflection, I realized when you have those experiences sort of stacked up, you know that if you make a minor mistake, like using their logo without permission, you risk failure. And I think that's when becoming an adult kind of gets into it. You have sort of this, you understand where problems can come from. And as a result, you understand where all the points of failure and yeah, like it just becomes very scary. It becomes intimidating. And I'm very fortunate. I have no idea how it happened, but we turned that failure into let's try again. And we actually spent many months until we turned 18, visiting people in assisted living facilities instead, because they would let us in. And as a result of that, we actually found one of our biggest donors. We explained, during one of our visits, we're here, we want to spend time with you guys. We believe video games can really brighten your mood, brighten your day. Let's spend some time together. But at the same time, they don't play video games, right? Like it was this weird sort of dynamic. But they heard we were doing that to raise awareness and raise funds to be able to go to children's hospitals. And it turned into something beautiful. And it turned into something beautiful because I think we were willing to take that failure and turn it into something else. So I guess there's two parts to it. Number one is just because you have seen points of failure many, many times in your life, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try, because especially with the second point, you should be prepared to find joy, to find fun in the pivot. And I think that's really important. So since then, I've kind of gone into things assuming it will fail. And I come up with all these ways it will fail because of my past experiences. And really, certainly part of it is how do we prevent that failure, right? The obvious things, like if we're shipping a product, we want to make sure that we can send it to people. But the things that really we have no control over, right? Like if we forget a piece of paperwork or something like that, where it's just sort of random failure, what can we do ahead of time instead of trying to prevent that failure so much that we never actually take that leap of faith? Let's just write ahead of time. Sort of our planning process is this is what we learn from that failure that we're anticipating. So we sort of, we turn that fear of failure, the thing that might otherwise hold us back, and say, let's just go for it because that failure will teach us X. And as a result, it's not really a failure, right? It's a success because we learned something from it. So I found it's really helpful to structure it and just say, yeah, I'm afraid of this failure. It could happen. We'll try to prevent it. But if it does happen, this is what we'll learn from it. So let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I really love that attitude, Dillon. We've all heard about rejection therapy, where you just start asking questions when you're at the coffee shop. Just ask them, hey, can I get an employee discount? And just seeing what's rejected. But it's a little bit different for you. And I think it's so powerful of that. It sounds like you race to and you plan for, and you kind of get excited for it sounds like, Dillon, of a potential failure because of all the lessons and things and opportunities that will come out of it. You didn't know that you were going to go into rehab facilities, for example, but that's something that per that pivot, per something, an obstacle that got in your way, you just adjusted on the fly. So speaking of adjusting on the fly, I do want to talk business strategy with you while you're here with us today, of course, because helping people break through that $1 million a year revenue barrier, that's something that we all aspire to. Every single person has that. I'd say that the first inflection point is everyone wants to make six figures. And then from there, the question is, how do we scale to seven figures and beyond? Talk to us about some of those inflection points along the way. Especially, it's fun having this conversation on the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast because there's inflection points even from there. Your first client, your first 10K month, right, and scaling up. Talk to us about those inflection points.
Yeah, I think why we sort of put $1 million, of course, the actual $1 million from our perspective is arbitrary because we do support people at all those points. But the reason we say that, I think, is because when you begin as an entrepreneur, $1 million, less so these days with inflation and stuff, but $1 million is such a quintessential part of like the American dream. I think $1 million is a very concise way to say, that is, you've made it, I think, in a lot of ways. But regardless of what that particular number is, ultimately, we kind of break it down into a very simple process, regardless of where you are. First, number one, we say, do you have any data? If you don't have any data, what's the most accurate data that you can get. If you have yet to have a client, you can certainly, you can ask around, you can check industry averages, or if you truly are stuck at that $1 million and you cannot really consistently get to 1.1, 1.2 or whatever, you probably have some data. So really understand exactly where that is. The metaphor that I like to provide is before you can go and bench press 235 pounds, you need to know what you can bench press today, right? So you got to get in there, you got to load up the bar and try your best. That's kind of the first phase we always do, is figure out where you are. And then from there, you can realistically say, where do we want to go? So if we're continuing with the gym example, you get in there and you lift the bar, and that's the maximum effort you can do. That's great. We know your starting point. Let's make it happen. But let's set really good expectations for ourselves so we don't get burned out. And we set systems in place that make a lot of sense based on where we are. Saying you're going to go from the bar to 235 pounds in 6 months, probably pretty unrealistic for the average person. In the same way, it would be very unrealistic for someone to say, I got my first client, how can I make $1 million in 6 months? So that's step 2 for us, is usually about setting realistic goals. And the reason we do that is because step 3 is how we're going to transition from where we are to where we want to go. And that process is, you have to be very honest with yourself. You have to say, this is the momentum we've had so far. We can assume it's certainly going to stay the same. We make some adjustments and it's going to go a little bit faster. But it's never going to be something that is physically impossible or logically impossible. So regardless of the inflection point, there's not really a common theme between people except for those 3 steps. And part of that third step of figuring out how we get from A to B is understanding where our bottleneck is in the data. So if you have yet to have your first client, your bottleneck is very obvious. You need clients, right? To get clients, you need phone calls. To get phone calls, you need brand awareness. Let's build a campaign for brand awareness. If you're all the way on the other side and you have 1,000 customers a month, let's say you're selling some sort of e-commerce product, but you're having trouble with your data is suggesting that people aren't coming back. Okay, well, that's our bottleneck. Let's focus on that. But basically, we come to a point where we determine the primary way we're going to grow past that next inflection point, the secondary way, and a tertiary way. We invest 50% we recommend you invest about 50% of your resources into that primary, and then the other 50% in the secondary and tertiary. And the reason there is, again, you just sort of figure out where you are, the most likely best step forward, the most realistic outcome, and then you sort of just, you make it happen. The details of which are different for everyone. But yeah, we really try to simplify it into those steps.
Yeah, Dillon, you're throwing that word focus around quite a bit today. So I want to talk about that because, and I'll use myself as a very bad example. So after I graduated from college, having run my soccer blog successfully, I started an agency and I was brand new to the agency world, Dillon. So I was focusing on all the very important things, like what my logo looked like and what my business cards looked like. And then I quickly realized those don't drive revenue. Those don't drive growth. I was obsessing about all of those things. Obviously, you are just like me these days, biased towards marketing, and we fully recognize the importance of marketing and intangible revenue growth that comes with it. Talk to me about those focus areas, because working with so many different companies, I'm sure you've seen all of their different focal points. So in your vantage point and from your perspective, what are those things we should focus on and what are those foolish things that we happen to focus on?
Yeah, again, I think it's going to depend on a case-by-case basis, but really you got to think about the value that you're providing the people who will be giving you money. And that is the case in the nonprofits I did 10 years ago or the clients I'm serving now. We need to think about why someone gives us money. And that comes down to really understanding the value. And then from that point forward, you can go sort of one of 2 directions. Typically, you want to do both. Number 1 is you figure out, where is my audience that is looking for that value? First of all, who is that audience? Secondly, where are they? Are they looking for this kind of value on social media? Are they looking for this value in a retail experience? Where and how are they expecting to find this value? And how can we provide little chunks, little bits, little puzzle pieces of value that contribute to that greater value over time? So that's really important to break down, and that will kind of tell you where to focus a little bit, right? If for example, one of our clients, they sell custom vans. They'll put together a van that you can live in, for road tripping. people are probably not looking for that inside, like on their way to work, right? So billboards probably don't make the most sense. Let's not focus on something like that. Let's think about where they are looking, which is often blog posts, YouTube videos, and sort of lifestyle blogs. So in that situation, our focus should be there. Like you said, you should take care of the sort of bare minimum basic requirements. We have a good logo that looks nice. Don't need to be super specific. We have a website that's functional where people can get in contact the way they expect to. Good, we're good to go. Now let's focus on the channels where our value is best communicated. And then the other direction, once you start thinking about that value, is sort of the financials of it all, right? So if you understand your customer really well and you understand the value, you more than likely have a price. And if you have a price, you need to figure out kind of how it works out to where you can acquire enough clients and sell enough product in such a way where that value is profitable. And that kind of fits into the operation sides that we don't usually provide execution services for, but certainly recommendations on. So this is all getting a bit vague, but what I mean by all this is make sure your price is set up in such a way, make sure you're focusing on delivering the value so that your operations are streamlined and you're not paying $100 for a customer and then that customer gives you $20, right? You need to make sure that sort of not only the value you're providing them, but the value of their cash is equivalent. And I'm having trouble being more specific than that because it always depends on the client. But yeah, you figure out where your audience is. That's going to tell you where to focus if you're really stuck on how to grow. And then just make sure that the numbers make sense. And if the numbers make sense where you were thinking about focusing, you're good to go. Let's spend some resources there and then reassess in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, Dillon, I feel you on that. Trust me, as a podcast host, I know how hard it is to give specific examples that apply universally, but I think the important part is that you're sharing your thought process with us. I love the fact that you called out, hey, if your cost to acquire a customer is $100, it's great if your revenue on that customer is $10,000, but it's terrible if you're selling Frisbees and you're only going to make $20 from it. So it's really cool to hear the way you think through these business and growth challenges. I want to ask you about something. I teased it at the very top of the episode, hands-free marketing strategies. It's right there in that gap that Cosmoforge plugs for your clients. What the heck are hands-free marketing strategies?
Yeah, so I've worked at a few different agencies and I've worked in-house before. And I think ultimately the reason that you would hire us is because you want to grow your business. And usually what that means, most entrepreneurs, they start off as sort of technicians that are really good at doing the thing. Right? They're really good at baking cakes, or they're really good at making custom bands, or anything in between. And so at some point, yeah, they probably have to figure out how to do some marketing. But if they're at the point where they're ready to grow, they want someone who is going to take care of it. And at the agencies I've worked at, or even in-house, there's this reoccurring problem where the entrepreneur who hires someone to support with their marketing, they get some time freed, but if we're having meetings about how to, if for example, I'm saying, hey, we changed one keyword in your Google Ads campaign, let's have a meeting to make sure that works out. The value that you get from our services is kind of lost. So what's really important to us, what hands-free really means, is you have the seal of approval of people who have worked on this before, that we are not just thinking about these random vanity metrics. We're not just thinking about making the graph go up. You have people on your team that are doing whatever it takes to grow your business, and in a way that is sustainable. So another way of, phrasing it is we really see ourselves as sort of a co-founder to your business with a marketing edge, right? And what that means is when we're driving in the middle of the night, we're thinking about our clients. We're thinking about how we can take it to the next level. I guess we just take our clients as very personal, and it's hands-free because just like with a co-founder, you trust that they're going to do their part. They're going to make it happen. We're going to do our part. We're going to make it happen in a way where, we're going to make sure you have full visibility. We're going to make sure that you have your ideas executed. But if you don't have any of that and you're focused so much on operations, we're there and we're thinking about what to do next. We're implementing campaigns. We're going to send you a brief and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. If you have thoughts, let us know. Otherwise, this campaign is going live because we think this is the best next step. So it's hands-free in the sense that you don't have to worry about the details unless you want to.
Yeah, I love that. Dillon, you use Google Ads as one such example, but I know how data-driven your approach is. So I want to talk about channels because it obviously is a core part to the way that you guys work, which is very different, by the way, from if I hire a Google Ads agency. They're going to make me do Google Ads. That's why I'm hiring them. Talk to us about the different channels that you guys execute on and how that plays into the blueprint that you put together.
Yeah, most of our clients we really specialize in is high lead value clients. And the only reason I say that is because in their case, Google Ads is almost always a good channel to consider. But it goes back to that sort of considering the value that you provide as a business and where people are expecting to find that value. Google Ads comes out very often because you can target people when they are asking specific questions. So as a result, it's very easy to get your value in front of when they expect your value. But no, what we typically do is we take a look at the value that your company provides, and then we determine a channel strategy that makes the most sense based on your financials. So what that means is if you're trying to acquire the average customer is worth $100,000, it's silly for us to say, let's just set up a Google Ads campaign and run Google Ads, because it's very unlikely someone is making a $100,000 Google search. More than likely, they're making a Google search that is a small fraction of that huge contract, in which case we need to make sure that our strategy considers other marketing channels. Sometimes we might need to sponsor events and then do LinkedIn ads to people who attended that event, and then YouTube ads. And we just really need to, we spend a lot of time thinking about the touch points of value that our clients have with their customers. And as a result, yeah, it's very different how we see ourselves. Again, we see ourselves as a co-founder. And so we see ourselves as, well, let's figure out what channels make the most sense. It's never going to be the same from company to company. Google Ads is frequently overlapped, but not always. And then because we see ourselves, we have sort of our standard recommendations. For example, we can do Google Ads, we can do SEO, we can do the basics, we can do direct mail. But if we were doing something like, let's say, podcasting, podcasting sponsorships, that's something where we have a network of people that we would reach out to and manage them and say, this is something our client needs. It's not necessarily our area of expertise. So we're going to pursue a freelancer or pursue an agency as part of our relationship with our client and make sure that we are managing them in a way that's integrated to the rest of the funnel that we're building out. So yeah, really channel selection just comes down to, are we touching value in the right point? And is it financially viable to have that conversation with the prospects at that time?
Yeah, Dillon, I love those considerations. Again, so much of it is coming back to that thought process and the very important questions that we all need to be asking ourselves in our businesses. And what I think is really cool about your approach, Dillon, is that the answers don't come from us. They don't have to come from us, the business owners. They come from our customers. They come from the people that we want to be serving. And I think that's such an important part of your approach that shines through with all of your answers here today. Anytime I have marketing conversations these days, I have to bring up the elephant in the room, which is, of course, AI, because today everybody thinks they're a master marketing strategist, and there's some good things that AI does for us. There's some things that AI can't do all of those things for us. So I guess this is a twofold question for you, Dillon, both as a marketer who is an outsourced business partner and co-founder for your clients, but also as one of us, as a fellow entrepreneur in and of yourself. What are some of those ways that you're seeing AI positively impact the marketing world? And then what are some of those ways that you're saying, you know what, it's not quite there yet, as much as we all want to force things with ChatGPT?
Yeah, I mean, I think text-based generators like ChatGPT, I think the pros outweigh the cons, but you do need to acknowledge the cons. I think as an industry, what's happening is kind of twofold. A lot of people are devaluing the services that marketers provide, especially if you're in sort of the copywriting space, because they can make something that's pretty solid with ChatGPT. At the same time, I think it's increasing the value of sort of related services, because a lot of people are entering the market as providers using these tools in a way that really isn't that 10 out of 10 execution. There's so many people in the market now that are providing sort of a 5 out of 10 service, which is great. I hope it's working out for them. But at the same time, I think people are realizing now sort of 2 years out of the big push with ChatGPT, especially, that there's still so much value in the human touch. And I think really where the value comes from that ChatGPT doesn't have is sort of the context. So you can provide it as much context as you want, but really it comes down to, again, you got to think about what are people expecting to hear at this point. So, if we were putting together let's say a video script, right, for a promotional campaign, we can tell ChatGPT that we sell custom ironwork and we serve this community and we're focused on community, customer service, that sort of thing, right? You can give it the bylines, but it doesn't really factor in what the website looks like or when the video is showing this, when this video is being shown to the audience. So, I would say you just got to, if you're going to use it, you got to really think about the context and make sure that you're thinking about the entire marketing funnel, the entire relationship with the customer, and giving that to ChatGPT. There's tons of value on the data side, as well. Some of the bigger clients that actually has substantial data, we can do a lot of really good stuff there, figuring out like A/B tests and just figuring out what segments are best to pursue, that kind of thing. So I guess I would say proceed carefully. Proceed carefully if you are a business owner that are looking to use it as a quick win, because sometimes it can be a quick win. There's use cases for it, but it's not going to be an entrepreneur for you. You still have to do that, and you sort of have to guide it just like you would any other tool. Be careful if you're an entrepreneur that is hiring people. Make sure that if they are using ChatGPT, it's done so responsibly, right? It's done so to make them more effective, not to replace them. Because I think ultimately, if you do that, you will, you're at significant risk of losing campaign performance, because it's going to lose that integrated context, which we really think is the most important thing about marketing. So nuanced. It's somewhere in the middle.
For sure. I love that though, Dillon, because I feel like in the business world today, everyone is just all in on AI in all the ways, but proceed carefully. It's really good advice for our listeners. And this is the real stuff that we always aim to deliver in these conversations. So I appreciate you doing it in such a transparent way, because this is the stuff that us as entrepreneurs, we talk about, we think about, and the fact that you're really sharing all of these things with us here today, it's important considerations for our own unique businesses. So along those lines and all this great advice that you've given us, I have no idea how you're going to top that for my final question, which is, what's that one takeaway, the one piece of advice, knowing that we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different levels of their personal and professional journeys? What's that one thing that you want to impart on them from today's episode?
I would say track where you are right now, in one way or another. If you're an entrepreneur, track what you're dreaming of, what you dislike, what you like about your 9 to 5. If you're an entrepreneur, same thing. Track how much time you're spending on the tasks you love doing, the tasks you hate doing. I would say sort of the best way forward is to modify your current position, right? If you want to improve, if you want to become that next version of yourself, you have to know where you are right now. So find opportunities to track that. You don't need to change it right now. Just write it down, get a starting point somewhere. And one day you're going to wake up and say, it's time to change. Knowing where you're changing from, I think, is going to be really valuable in whatever comes next.
Yes, Dillon, in over 1,000 episodes, you're the first one to give that advice, and it's powerful advice. Improve your position. I really like that, which of course starts with that tracking and knowing where we are. Coming back to that fitness analogy you use, you can't set a target of how much you want to lift until you know how much you can lift. So really powerful advice there. I think what you're doing at Cosmoforge is incredible. I think the work that you're doing is very cool. Beyond that, I think the brand that you've built is incredible, and the value that you and your business partner and your entire team is putting out into the world. It's amazing to see not only the work, but again, I said it a few times in today's conversation, the thought process behind it. It's really interesting as to how you can cater these solutions to clients wherever they are. So with that in mind, Dillon, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Sure. Yeah, you can reach out, whether it's just small questions, you want some ideas. If you're closer to the entrepreneur side, if you're closer to the entrepreneur side, and you have that barrier and you want to break through, in either case, you can visit our website, cosmoforge.io.
Yes, listeners, and you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find that link. It's down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. It's cosmoforge.io, or you can just click right on through from the show notes. So definitely check that out down below. We're also linking to Dillon's personal LinkedIn. So if you want to get a hold of him and continue this conversation and talk about your business growth, don't be shy. You see how transparent and open and how much he loves talking about business as well. That's something that's so evident. So don't be shy. Check those links out down in the show notes. Otherwise, Dillon, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.